The Montana sun burned low, painting the grasslands gold as dust swirled around the Lazy J Ranch. Tessa Malone, a woman with fire in her eyes and a reputation sharper than a barbed fence, rode into the yard, her black mare snorting defiance. At 30, Tessa was no stranger to hard stares. She'd carved a life as a horse trader in a land ruled by men, her wit and grit outmatching their fists. The ranch belonged to Jace Colton, a widowed cattle baron whose wealth rivaled his temper, his name whispered in saloons from Bozeman to Billings. Tessa had come to settle a debt. Colton owed her for a dozen Mustangs, but she'd heard he was dodging payment, claiming her horses were wild. She dismounted, her boots hitting the dirt with purpose, her leather vest creaking. Colton stood on his porch, his broad frame shadowed, eyes raking her like she was prey. "You got my money, Jace?" she called, voice sharp as a whip. His smirk was slow, deliberate, lingering on her curves. "Horses ain't worth what you're asking," he drawled, stepping closer. Tessa held his gaze, unflinching, her pulse steady despite the heat in his look. "Keep looking at me," she said, her voice low, dangerous. "I'm not to blame for what happens between your thighs." The words hung, bold and raw, silencing the ranch hands nearby. Colton's face hardened, desire and anger warring in his eyes. Tessa didn't blink. She'd faced men like him before, men who thought they could take what they wanted. But she wasn't here to play. The debt was hers, and she'd collect, even if it meant staring down a man whose power could crush her. A crowd gathered, sensing a storm. Tessa's hand rested near the knife at her belt, ready for whatever came next. Colton's laugh broke the tension, low and rough, but his eyes never left Tessa. "You got a mouth on you, woman," he said, descending the porch steps, his spurs jingling. The ranch hands watched, some grinning, others uneasy, as the air crackled between them. Tessa stood her ground, her mare shifting behind her, sensing her rider's steel. She'd dealt with Colton's kind, men who saw her beauty as a challenge, her independence as an insult, but Tessa Malone bowed to no one. "Pay me what you owe," she said, her voice cutting through the dusk. 12 Mustangs, broke and delivered, $500. Colton stopped a foot away, close enough for her to smell tobacco and leather. His gaze lingered, bold and unapologetic, but Tessa met it with fire. "You think you can walk onto my land and make demands?" he asked, voice low. She smirked, leaning closer. "I think you're stalling because you can't handle a woman who knows her worth." A murmur rippled through the hands, some chuckling, others shifting nervously. Colton's jaw tightened, but his eyes betrayed a spark. Admiration, maybe. Or something hungrier. Tessa didn't care. She needed the money to keep her stable running, to stay free in a world that wanted her tamed. "Show me the horses," Colton said finally, turning toward the corral. Tessa followed, her boots steady, aware of every eye on her. The Mustangs were there, strong and sleek, their coats gleaming in the fading light. "They're worth every cent," she said, patting one's flank. Colton studied them, then her, his silence heavy. "Maybe," he said, "but I don't pay without a test." He nodded toward a black stallion, the wildest of the lot. "Ride him. Prove they're broke." Tessa's heart quickened, not from fear, but from the challenge. She'd tamed worse than horses. "Watch me," she said, vaulting into the saddle. The stallion bucked, but Tessa held on, her laugh ringing as she met Colton's gaze. The stallion reared, hooves slashing the air, but Tessa was a storm herself, her thighs gripping tight, her hands steady on the reins. The ranch hands whooped, some betting she'd fall, others awed as she bent the beast to her will. Colton watched, arms crossed, his smirk fading to something unreadable, respect maybe, or desire he couldn't hide. Tessa felt his eyes, felt the weight of every stare, but she rode like the wind, her braid whipping, her focus iron. The stallion settled, snorting as she guided him in a tight circle, then dismounted with a flourish. Satisfied? She asked, dusting her hands, her breath steady despite the ride. Colton nodded slowly, but his voice was gruff. Horses are good, but I still ain't paying till we talk terms. Tessa's eyes narrowed. Terms meant trouble. She'd heard of Colton's deals, how he twisted them to his favor. Name your price then, she said, stepping close, her voice a dare. He leaned in, his breath warm. Dinner, my house, tonight. The hands fell silent, sensing a line crossed. Tessa's laugh was sharp, cutting. You think I'm for sale, Jace? Pay the 500 and we're done. His eyes darkened, not with anger, but something deeper, a hunger she recognized but wouldn't indulge. You're on my land, he said softly. My rules. Tessa's hand twitched toward her knife, but she held back. She'd play his game, but on her terms. Fine, she said. Dinner, but I bring my own knife. The hands chuckled, breaking the tension, but Colton's gaze didn't waver. He nodded, gesturing to the ranch house. Tessa followed, her mare trailing, her heart a drumbeat of defiance. She'd get her money, but she'd be damned if she let Colton think he owned her. The night was young, and Tessa Malone was no man's prize. The ranch house was grand, its oak table laden with beef and whiskey, the walls hung with antlers and hides. Tessa sat across from Colton, her knife beside her plate, a silent reminder of her edge. The hands had been sent away, leaving them alone, the fire casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Colton poured whiskey, his eyes never leaving her. You're not like other women, he said, his voice low, probing. Tessa sipped, the burn steadying her. And you're just like other men, she shot back, thinking you can buy what you can't tame. His laugh was genuine, but his gaze was a challenge. I don't want to tame you, Tessa. I want to understand you. She didn't trust it. Men like Colton always had angles. She cut into her steak, her movements deliberate. You want my horses, my time, my attention. What's next, Jace? He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Maybe I want you. The words hung, bold as her own, but Tessa didn't flinch. Keep looking at me, she said, echoing her earlier challenge. I'm not to blame for what you feel. His eyes flared, but he didn't push. Instead, he shifted, pulling a pouch from his coat. 300, he said, tossing it across. Take it and go, or stay and negotiate. Tessa's blood simmered. 300 was an insult, but leaving meant losing the rest. She pocketed the pouch, her mind racing. You owe me 200 more, she said, standing. I'll be back tomorrow. Colton rose too, blocking her path. You're playing a dangerous game, he warned, his voice soft but edged. Tessa met his gaze, her knife hand steady. I've played worse. She brushed past him, the air electric, and stepped into the night. The ranch felt alive, watching as she mounted her mare. Colton's silhouette filled the doorway, his intentions unclear. Tessa rode into the dark, the pouch heavy, her resolve heavier. The night air bit at Tessa's face as she rode to her camp, a small setup by the river where her remaining horses grazed. The pouch of coins jingled, but $200 short, gnawed at her. Colton's game was clear. He wanted control, not just her horses. She'd met men like him, ranchers who saw her as a prize to win, a fire to douse. But Tessa had fought too hard for her freedom, breaking horses and barriers to let a man like Jace Colton cage her. She tethered her mare, checking the herd under. Starlight, their breaths clouding in the chill. Her camp was simple, a tent, a fire pit, her bedroll, but it was hers, earned through years of sweat and deals. As she built a fire, her thoughts drifted to Colton's eyes, the way they'd held hers, not just with want, but with something deeper, like he saw her. She shook it off. Men's desires were traps, and she'd dodged enough. A rustle in the brush snapped her alert, her knife drawn in an instant. A figure emerged, Sam, her old friend, a grizzled trader who'd taught her the ropes. Heard you tangled with Colton, he said, warming his hands by her fire. Tessa nodded, recounting the dinner, the partial payment. Sam's face darkened. Jace Colton don't pay fair. Word is he's got debts, big ones. Might be why he's holding out. Tessa's gut twisted. Debts meant desperation, and desperate men were dangerous. She'd return at dawn, demand the rest, but Sam's warning lingered. Watch yourself, Tessa, he said, leaving her to the night. She sat by the fire, the knife across her lap, Colton's words echoing, I want you. She wasn't his, never would be, but the heat in his gaze had stirred something she didn't want to name. The river murmured, and Tessa steeled herself. Tomorrow she'd face him, not as a woman to be won, but as Tessa Malone, who bowed to no one. Dawn broke cold, the grasslands shimmering with frost as Tessa rode back to the Lazy J. Her mare's hooves pounded a rhythm that matched her resolve. Get the money, walk away. Colton's ranch sprawled before her, its corrals bustling with hands, the air thick with the scent of cattle and hay. She dismounted, her knife tucked in her belt, the pouch of 300 coins a weight in her vest. Colton was by the barn, barking orders, his shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing arms corded with muscle. He saw her, his smirk returning, but his eyes held a flicker of respect. Back for more, Tessa? He called, striding over. She didn't smile. Back for what's mine, $200, now. The hands paused, sensing a showdown. Colton's gaze roamed her, lingering, but she held firm. You're a stubborn one, he said, stepping closer, his voice low. I like